let's talk about handgun safety. Okay, obviously a firearm is a dangerous tool. If it weren't dangerous, it wouldn't be effective. It's a deadly weapon, and it needs to be handled very, very safely. Safety is very important to burn into your brain. It's very important to learn ritualistic procedures that you always follow to the T when you handle a gun. There are 4 principles that are essentially universal principles that you must burn into your brain. And if you violate any one of them, you could be up for a very rude awakening. It's called the Big Bang Theory. And the first rule, in order to avoid that Big Bang, is, you know, the worst thing that can happen is to hear a bang when you don't expect to hear anything, or to hear a click when you expect to hear a bang. So in order to assure that you hear the bang when you want to hear the bang and you don't hear a bang when you don't want to hear it, the first thing is to respect all firearms and treat them as if they're always loaded. Never assume that a firearm is unloaded until you've checked it and rechecked it and made sure that the gun is clear. But even after you've checked it and assured yourself and anyone with you that the gun is clear, you still have to follow other safety rules, which we're going to proceed to. So an unloaded gun is still treated as a loaded gun, which means, rule number 2, you never point the gun, whether it's loaded, obviously, or unloaded, at anything or anybody that you don't have designs on destroying, right? So you never point a gun in anyone's direction. So if I take this blue gun here, right? I'm not going to even point the blue gun out here at people, but the point is that if that was a person over there, that Wavemaster heavy bag, whatever, I wouldn't want to point this gun at that person even after I checked to see that it was unloaded. It's verboten. Firearms should always be pointed in a safe direction, which means a direction in which, should the gun go off, it's not going to kill anybody, and the worst thing that can happen is it damages property. Okay, so safe direction is extremely important. Always be aware of where your gun is pointing. People make the mistake of pointing guns at themselves. You know, you don't want to be in a situation where you're covering a part of your body with a firearm. Okay, so that's very important. So rule number 1 is treat all guns as if they're always loaded. Rule number 2 is never point a firearm at anything you don't intend to destroy. Rule number 3 is keep your finger off the trigger like this. This is on the trigger, this is off the trigger. The only time your finger should be on the trigger is when you're on target and you've made the decision to shoot. But while you're shooting, your finger's on the trigger. Once you're done shooting, your finger is off the trigger. Your finger should never be on the trigger except when you're shooting. The trigger is the go button. If you have your finger on the trigger, when you're holstering your gun, you will have an accidental discharge as you push the gun into your pants and push the trigger face into your trigger finger. And that is what we call an unintended Big Bang. We don't want that to happen. So trigger discipline is very important. And the 4th very important safety rule is don't shoot at anything that you don't know or haven't identified as legit to shoot at, i.e. a target. At night, you're in your house, you hear of a door opening, you see a shadow, you think it's an intruder, you point your gun, and it turns out to be someone familiar to you that doesn't deserve having a gun pointed at him or her. Not a good thing. Recipe for disaster. So only point a gun at what you've identified as warranted to point a gun at. Which brings up the very important point that we never, ever have to feel obligated to shoot something just because we've drawn down on that something. Because guns prevent crimes. And 98% of the time, when some bad guy decides to pick you as a victim, or pick your house to victimize, to rob, or whatever, and then they find out that you're armed, they decide to go somewhere else to find something else to do. And at that point, you are obligated to let them go. You can't shoot them. You can't shoot somebody out of revenge. You can't shoot somebody legally, that is, to punish them or intimidate them. Legally, your only right is to use deadly force if your life is threatened or that of someone whom you have responsibility for.